senior and I have gathered some questions from high school students. Why is marijuana illegal and tobacco is legal?
In order to understand why one drug is legal and another one is illegal, you usually have to look back into history to figure out what was going on at the time when the laws were made. Marijuana became illegal in the early part of the 20th century, in the early 1900s. And at that point, I don't believe doctors, scientists, legislators, or even your average person, I don't believe they knew that tobacco contained a drug. People knew that marijuana was a drug, but I don't think back when they made the laws about drugs, they knew that tobacco contained a drug. Of course, today, everyone knows tobacco contains the drug nicotine, and nicotine might be one of the most addictive drugs. I think if we knew today if we knew back then what we know today, we probably would not have allowed tobacco to stay legal for all these years. But right now, tobacco is so firmly entrenched in our society. We have, millions of people addicted to it. We have thousands of people involved with growing tobacco, making cigarettes, selling cigarettes, advertising cigarettes. There would be a lot of chaos that would ensue if we suddenly made tobacco illegal. So the answer to the question of why marijuana is illegal and tobacco is legal, to some extent, I think it has to go with misinformation. And even today, not everybody is aware of how addicting marijuana is. So I think the laws that were passed, when they were passed, were based a lot of times on the information that was held at the time. And now we know more about drugs and about tobacco and about marijuana.
In some states, more teens smoke marijuana than tobacco. Why?
I believe the reason why many states have higher rates of teenagers using marijuana has to do with, again, information and to some extent misinformation. In America today, millions of dollars are spent on anti-tobacco education. There's the advertisements from the American Heart Association, the Lung Cancer Association, the Truth.org do great TV commercials about cigarettes. Even the cigarette companies are forced by law to pay for anti-cigarette ads. But one thing that isn't happening in many states is kids are not always getting good marijuana prevention education. A lot of times when I do my classes with Prevention Plus, the first time a student has heard that marijuana is addictive is when they're in 9th or 10th grade. They were taught that tobacco is addictive when they were like in kindergarten. So it seems like there's a lot less information about marijuana. In fact, when I tell high school students that marijuana is damaging to your respiratory system, some high school students are shocked because they've been hearing about the damage of tobacco since they were little kids. But sometimes the first time that anyone has taught them that marijuana causes harm to your respiratory system is when they're in high school having a Prevention Plus class. And to me, this is a real problem. So why is marijuana more popular? It has a lot to do with information and misinformation.
Why is the drinking age 21 in the USA?
Well, the USA has done a lot of different experiments around the drinking age. In the 17 and 1800s, we didn't have a drinking age. People of any age could drink alcohol. And you got to remember, back then, we didn't really recognize alcohol as being a drug. Alcohol was looked at as a beverage. And in some cases, it was a safe or healthy beverage because back in those days, there wasn't always safe water supplies. Today, we have safe water in every home, every school, everywhere you go, there's safe drinking water. But there was a time in history when alcohol was actually considered safer to drink than water because so much water was contaminated. But getting into the legal thing, America has tried having no age limit. America has had an 18-year-old age limit. America has had a 21-year-old age limit. And then at one point, it went from 21 back to 18. What happened across the country was there was an increase in deaths of young people related to drinking and driving. And that's why they eventually made the law 21, and it has stayed 21 for more than 30 years. The other thing that is interesting is when they made the drinking age 21, scientists did not know as much about the brain as we know today. And one of the things we know today about the brain is the brain continues to grow and change and learn quite a bit until a person is approximately 21 to 23 years old. And so there is actually now a medical scientific reason why waiting to 21 is a good idea. And the reason it's a good idea is if you wait to 21 before drinking alcohol, it lowers your risk of getting addicted to alcohol. So the reason why the age is 21 has to do with driving, but now we also know it has to do with brain development.
Is it safer for teens to learn drinking and their limits than to wait until age 21?
Well, a lot of people wonder about this. Would it be better for teens to drink when they're in high school or drink with their families? In the countries where they do have a lot of teenagers drinking with their families, you generally see less teenagers getting drunk, having overdoses, getting sexually assaulted, and even becoming teenage alcoholics. But there is a downside to early drinking, and that has to do with liver damage. In countries where teens tend to drink more and more often, they have higher rates of adults that have liver damage. So waiting until you're 21 not only gives you a less risk of becoming alcoholic, it also lowers your risk of some of the liver damage that occurs with early drinking. So there are benefits to waiting, but one thing that's also to be said is there is some sort of benefit if parents and families are supervising their teens drinking. Ultimately, every parent is going to have to make a decision whether they allow their child to drink before they're 21 or whether they encourage their child to wait until 21. Every teenager is also faced with that same decision. Should I wait until I'm of legal age or should I experiment when it's illegal? And the benefits of waiting are well known and the risks of experimenting are well known. You know, teens who don't experiment with alcohol don't become teenage alcoholics. Girls who don't experiment with alcohol are much less likely to be the victim of a sexual assault. A person is probably going to have a better reputation in their community if they're not drinking alcohol when they're a teenager. These days, having a teen drunk driving or a teen possession of alcohol charge could affect your ability to get into the school of your choice. So I think there's a lot of good reasons for waiting until 21.
What do you think about medical marijuana?
When I'm asked about medical marijuana, I actually feel very similar as the way I feel about other drugs used medically, like Vicodin. When I hear about teenagers taking Vicodin because they have a broken ankle or because they had knee surgery, I don't feel really worried about them. But when I hear about teenagers taking Vicodin to get high, I feel really alarmed. And I feel similarly about medical marijuana. If a person has a legitimate medical need, if they have tried other ways of handling their illness or their disease, if they find relief from suffering from using medical marijuana, why would I want to get in the way of that? But on the other hand, most teenagers who use marijuana are not using it medically. They're taking it to get stoned. When people use marijuana as an intoxicant, there's a risk of addiction. When people use marijuana medically, there's a risk of addiction. So I think the important thing is a couple of things. One, why is the person wanting to use medical marijuana? Have they tried other methods to help themselves? Are they aware of the risk of respiratory diseases? Are they aware of the risk of addiction? Are they committed to not driving while they're under the influence of marijuana? These are the things that come up to mind when I think about medical marijuana. Am I completely against it? No. Am I completely for it? No. I think it needs to be handled with caution, just like we would handle any use of any drug or any medicine.